The city, a sprawling tapestry of steel and glass, throbbed with an indifferent rhythm, its ceaseless energy a stark contrast to the dramatic silence that often reigned in the penthouse apartment on the 15th floor of the prestigious Azure Tower. This was the domain of Victor and Isabelle Moreau, a couple whose lives were as meticulously curated as the art hanging on their walls. Victor, a titan in the tech industry, was a man of sharp intellect and sharper edges, his ambition matched only by his formidable charm. Isabelle, a former supermodel turned philanthropist, was a vision of sculpted beauty and refined elegance, her grace often masking a fiery temperament. Their relationship was a public spectacle of dazzling galas, exotic vacations, and an undeniable, almost magnetic, chemistry. Privately, however, it was a volatile dance of passion and power, love and resentment, held together by a fragile thread of mutual attraction and a fear of losing their meticulously constructed image. Their penthouse was a testament to their success. Panoramic windows offered breathtaking views of the city skyline, a minimalist design accentuated by bespoke furniture, and a sprawling balcony that wrapped around the entire living space, providing a vertiginous sense of both freedom and precariousness. It was on this balcony, 15 stories above the bustling streets, that the final, fatal act of their tumultuous drama would unfold. Their story began 5 years earlier, a whirlwind romance that ignited at a charity event. Victor was instantly captivated by Isabelle's ethereal beauty and sharp wit. Isabelle, tired of the superficiality of the modeling world, found Victor's intellect and drive intoxicating. Their courtship was intense, marked by grand gestures and passionate declarations. Within a year, they were married in a ceremony that graced the covers of countless society magazines. They were the it couple, the embodiment of modern success and glamorous romance. But beneath the polished veneer, cracks began to show almost immediately. Victor, accustomed to total control in his business empire, expected the same in his personal life. Isabelle, fiercely independent and accustomed to being adored, bristled under his possessive nature. Their passionate arguments were legendary amongst their close circle of friends, fierce verbal sparring matches that often ended with dramatic reconciliations. Friends often remarked that they fought as passionately as they loved, attributing it to their strong personalities. Few, however, truly understood the depth of the emotional wounds they inflicted upon each other, the simmering resentments that festered beneath their public smiles. Victor's initial adoration slowly morphed into a suffocating jealousy. He grew suspicious of Isabelle's lingering friendships from her modeling days, subtly questioning her loyalty, scrutinizing her every interaction. Isabelle, in turn, felt increasingly stifled, her artistic and philanthropic endeavors often dismissed by Victor as mere hobbies. She craved validation, but found herself constantly seeking his approval, trapped in a cycle of craving his love while simultaneously resenting his control. Finances, too, became a point of contention. While Isabelle had her own substantial wealth from her modeling career, Victor's fortune far surpassed hers. He held the purse strings to their lavish lifestyle, a fact he sometimes subtly, and sometimes overtly used to exert power. Isabelle hated feeling financially dependent, even though she contributed significantly to their joint expenses. This imbalance of power fueled her resentment, making her lash out in ways that only intensified Victor's possessiveness. Their arguments grew more frequent, more intense, and sometimes more physical. It started subtly, a harsh grip on the arm, a shove during a heated exchange. Never enough to leave lasting marks, but enough to instill fear, to create a chilling undercurrent in their relationship. Isabelle, ashamed and isolated, never spoke of these incidents, rationalizing them as passion, a byproduct of their intense love. Victor, always apologetic after these outbursts, would shower her with gifts and promises of change, drawing her back into the destructive cycle. One particular point of contention was a rumored affair Victor was having with his young, ambitious executive assistant, Sarah. Isabelle had no concrete proof, only whispers and Victor's increasingly secretive phone calls. The mere suspicion ignited a wildfire of jealousy and insecurity within her, pushing her already volatile emotions to the brink. She confronted Victor repeatedly, Her accusations met with infuriating denials and gaslighting, making her doubt her own sanity. Victor, a master manipulator, would twist her suspicions into evidence of her own instability, further isolating her. The night of the tragedy began like many others. Victor and Isabel had attended a high-profile charity gala, their public smiles belying the tension that crackled between them. They had argued in the car on the way home, a hushed but venomous exchange about a lingering glance Victor had given Sarah at the event. The argument escalated as soon as they entered the penthouse. "You think I didn't see you, Victor?" Isabel's voice was sharp, cutting through the opulent silence of their apartment. Whispering with her, laughing like I wasn't even there. Victor, already irritated by a business deal gone sour, scoffed. "Don't be ridiculous, Isabel. She's my assistant. We were discussing work. You're being paranoid again." "Paranoid? Or just finally seeing you for the snake you are?" Isabel retorted, her hands clenching into fists. "You think I don't know about Sarah? You think everyone doesn't know?" The accusation struck a nerve. Victor's face hardened. "You know nothing. You're a spoiled, jealous child who can't stand not being the center of attention." He threw his jacket onto a nearby chair, the silk rustling angrily. "And you're a hypocrite, a cheat. You demand loyalty, but you offer none." Isabel screamed, tears of rage and frustration welling in her eyes. "I waste my life trying to live up to your impossible standards. And for what? To be betrayed by you at every turn." The argument spiraled, each word a poisoned arrow aimed directly at the other's deepest insecurities. Victor brought up Isabel's past relationships, her perceived financial extravagance, her hollow philanthropy. Isabel attacked his ruthless business tactics, his coldness, his emotional unavailability. The barbs grew sharper, more personal, more damaging. They moved from the living room to the expansive balcony, the cool night air doing little to extinguish the flames of their fury. The city lights twinkled below, a dizzying array of distant stars. The railing, a sleek glass barrier, seemed to offer little protection from the sheer drop. "I can't do this anymore, Victor," Isabel sobbed, clutching her head. "I'm suffocating. I hate you." Victor, fueled by anger and a sense of injured pride, snapped. "Then leave, Isabel. Go. Nobody's stopping you. But don't expect a penny from me when you do." He knew her pride would never allow her to leave without a fight, without feeling she had one. "You think I care about your money?" Isabel shrieked, her voice cracking. "I care about the lies, the betrayal. I should have left you years ago." She turned, making a theatrical gesture towards the edge of the balcony, as if contemplating escape, or perhaps simply seeking to provoke a reaction. Victor, momentarily caught off guard by her sudden movement, saw red. The years of resentment, the constant battles, the feeling of being challenged and defied, all culminated in a single explosive moment. "Then go," he roared, striding towards her, his face contorted in a mask of fury. What happened next was a blur of motion, a tragic confluence of rage, momentum, and a single, fatal misstep. Whether it was a deliberate shove, a violent lunge, or a desperate attempt to grab her that went horribly wrong, no one would ever truly know for certain. But in that split second, amid the blinding fury and the dizzying height, Isabel went over the railing. Her scream was short, sharp, and cut off abruptly by the unforgiving force of gravity. Victor watched, horrified, as her elegant form plunged 15 stories, disappearing into the twinkling tapestry of the city below. Silence. A terrifying, absolute silence descended upon the penthouse balcony. Victor stood frozen, his rage instantly replaced by a cold, sickening dread. The only sound was the frantic pounding of his own heart, echoing in his ears. Below, a distant, muffled thud. Then, the piercing wail of sirens, growing louder, closer, tearing through the city's indifference. He stumbled back into the living room, his mind a chaotic mess of adrenaline and disbelief. Couldn't be, couldn't have happened. But the empty space on the balcony, the terrifying silence, spoke volumes. He looked at his shaking hands, covered in a thin sheen of sweat, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The argument, the fury, the fatal fall, it all replayed in his mind, a terrifying loop of regret and dawning horror. The police arrived swiftly, drawn by the frantic 911 calls from bewildered pedestrians who had witnessed the impossible from below. They found Victor Moreau in his penthouse, disheveled, distraught, and utterly broken, his carefully constructed world shattered into a million pieces. The scene below was horrific, a testament to the brutal finality of a 15-story plunge. The initial report spoke of a tragic accident, a terrible fall during a heated argument. But the investigators, led by the seasoned Detective Reynolds, felt a deeper, more sinister current beneath the surface. The volatile nature of the Moreau's relationship was well known, their dramatic fights a whispered legend. As Victor was led away for questioning, the media descended, the cameras flashing, the headlines already writing themselves. The it couple, the glamorous life, the penthouse and the precipice, a lover's quarrel had ended not just in a fall, but in a chilling question. Was it an accident, or was it murder? The investigation had only just begun. The bright, sterile interrogation room felt like a cage to Victor Moreau, a stark contrast to the opulent confines of his penthouse. Detective Reynolds, a man with tired eyes but a razor-sharp mind, sat across from him, his demeanor calm, yet unyielding. Beside him, Detective Ramirez, a younger, more empathetic officer, took notes, observing Victor's every twitch and hesitation. The city lights, once a romantic backdrop, now felt like accusing eyes, piercing through the dark glass of the police station window. Victor's initial story was clear, almost rehearsed. A heated argument, Isabel's dramatic gesture, a tragic accident. He claimed she had stumbled, lost her footing, and in his desperate attempt to save her, he had inadvertently contributed to her fall. He was distraught, visibly shaken, his voice hoarse with what appeared to be grief and shock. But Detective Reynolds had seen enough distraught suspects to know when to look deeper. He had already reviewed the initial crime scene report, studied the trajectory of Isabel's fall, and spoken to the first responders. He knew about the Moreau's tumultuous relationship, the whispered tales of their explosive arguments. He sensed a carefully constructed narrative, a performance designed to deflect blame. "Mr. Moreau," Detective Reynolds began, his voice a low, steady rumble. "We understand that emotions run high in a moment like that, but we need you to be completely honest with us. Every detail matters." Victor maintained his story, adding layers of self-pity and feigned remorse. He described Isabel's fiery temper, her unpredictability, her tendency towards dramatic flair. He painted himself as a victim of her volatile nature, a man trying to calm a distraught wife. Yet, there were subtle inconsistencies in his account, fleeting moments where his eyes darted away, a slight hesitation before answering a crucial question. Detective Ramirez, observing closely, noticed the lack of genuine sorrow in Victor's eyes. There was shock, yes, and fear, but not the profound, gut-wrenching grief of a man who had just lost the love of his life. His tears seemed forced, his distress almost theatrical. Meanwhile, the crime scene investigation continued at the penthouse. Forensic teams meticulously scoured the balcony, searching for any telltale signs. Struggle marks, fingerprints, anything that contradicted Victor's narrative. They found no clear signs of a prolonged struggle, no evidence of a dramatic fight that would have left significant damage. The glass railing was intact, without any significant smudges that would indicate a desperate grab. This, ironically, could support both an accident or a swift, decisive act. The autopsy report on Isabel came back quickly. The cause of death was blunt force trauma, consistent with a fall from a great height. But the medical examiner also noted several older bruises, faded but still visible, on Isabel's arms and torso. These weren't fresh. They suggested a history of physical altercations, lending credence to the rumors of a physically abusive component to their relationship. This detail, when presented to Victor, made his composure waver slightly. Those were just from our passionate moments," Victor stammered, his face paling. We were intense. It was never meant to harm her. Detective Reynolds pressed harder. Mr. Moreau, we have statements from several of Isabel's friends who reported seeing her with unexplained bruises. They expressed concern for her safety. Some even claimed she confided in them about your controlling behavior, your jealousy. Victor's carefully constructed facade began to crack. He became agitated, defensive, lashing out at the gossip and false accusations. He accused Isabel's friends of being jealous, of misinterpreting their unique relationship. This defensiveness, coupled with the emerging evidence, solidified the detective's suspicions. The investigation expanded to include interviews with Isabel's closest friends. They painted a picture of a woman increasingly trapped, her spirit slowly eroding under Victor's possessive thumb. One friend, Lena, a former model who had known Isabel for years, tearfully recounted a recent conversation where Isabel had expressed deep fear. She told me she wanted to leave him, Lena whispered. But she was afraid. She said Victor wouldn't let her go, that he'd ruin her, financially and professionally. Lena also mentioned the rumored affair with Sarah, Victor's assistant, stating that Isabel was heartbroken and humiliated by it. The detectives also interviewed Sarah, Victor's executive assistant. She was visibly nervous, hesitant to speak ill of her powerful boss. She denied any affair, claiming their relationship was strictly professional. However, her body language, her subtle avoidance of eye contact when discussing Victor's personal life, suggested otherwise. She admitted to seeing Victor and Isabel argue frequently, often hearing raised voices from the penthouse when she worked late. She also recalled Victor's intense possessiveness over Isabel, noting how he would constantly check up on her, even when she was traveling for charity work. The financial records of Victor and Isabel were also scrutinized. While both were wealthy, the detectives discovered that Victor had recently made a significant financial move, transferring a substantial portion of his assets into a trust that excluded Isabel. This was done just weeks before her death, a chilling detail that contradicted his claims of an undying love and suggested a calculated move to protect his fortune in anticipation of a potential divorce. This evidence directly contradicted Victor's earlier claims of being financially intertwined with Isabel and only strengthened the motive for ridding himself of an increasingly troublesome wife. The narrative of an accident began to crumble under the weight of these revelations. The history of abuse, the financial maneuvering, the escalating arguments, and the sheer height of the fall, it all pointed towards a more sinister conclusion. The detectives started to believe that the argument on the balcony was not just a quarrel, but a violent confrontation, and that Isabel's fall was not an accident, but a deliberate act. After nearly 24 hours of interrogation, Victor Moreau was emotionally and psychologically exhausted. The carefully constructed walls he had built around himself began to crumble. He was presented with the mounting evidence: the autopsy report, the witness statements, the financial records, and the inconsistencies in his own story. The pressure was immense. Finally, in a moment of raw, unvarnished despair, Victor broke. He didn't offer a full confession, not in the way the detectives hoped for. Instead, he painted a picture of a moment of explosive rage, a loss of control. She pushed me, he mumbled, his voice hoarse. She said she hated me. She was going to leave me and expose everything. I just reacted. I grabbed her, I pushed her back, and she went over. He buried his face in his hands, his body racked with shuddering sobs that finally seemed genuine. It was a partial confession, an admission of pushing, but still couched in the language of self-defense, of a tragic miscalculation. But for Detective Reynolds, it was enough. It directly contradicted his earlier claims of an accidental stumble and a desperate grab to save her. It confirmed the malicious intent, the act of pushing, even if he didn't explicitly admit to throwing her over. The lovers' quarrel had indeed ended in a plunge, and now it would lead to a murder charge. The news of Victor Moreau's confession, however partial, sent shockwaves through the city. The glamorous facade of the it couple had been brutally torn away, revealing a dark underbelly of abuse, betrayal, and ultimately, murder. The initial sympathy for Victor, the grieving husband, evaporated, replaced by outrage and disgust. Victor Moreau was formally charged with the murder of Isabelle Moreau. The legal battle that was to follow promised to be as dramatic and captivating as the lives of the couple themselves. The city, once fascinated by their success, was now gripped by the chilling reality of their downfall. The penthouse, once a symbol of their triumphs, now stood as a grim monument to a love that had turned deadly, a precipice from which a life had been tragically and violently cast away. The intertwined lives of Victor and Isabelle had reached their catastrophic end, leaving behind a trail of shattered dreams and a chilling murder charge that would forever haunt the Azure Tower. The trial of Victor Moreau for the murder of his wife, Isabelle, became a legal spectacle that dominated headlines for months. The courtroom was a theater, filled with reporters, legal enthusiasts, and a somber representation of Willow Creek's community, many of whom had been touched by the Harding story. The prosecution, led by a formidable district attorney, painted a vivid picture of a controlling, abusive husband driven by jealousy and a desire to maintain his public image and financial control. The defense, represented by a high-profile legal team, sought to portray Victor as a grieving widower, a victim of his wife's volatile temperament and a tragic accident born of a passionate argument. The prosecution methodically presented its case. Detective Reynolds and Deputy Jenkins delivered compelling testimonies, detailing the inconsistencies in Victor's initial statements, the evidence of prior domestic abuse gleaned from Isabelle's friends, and the chilling financial maneuvers Victor had made just weeks before Isabelle's death. The forensic team presented their findings, showcasing the trajectory of the fall, the lack of struggle marks on the balcony, and the older bruises on Isabelle's body, all pointing away from a simple accident. Isabelle's friend, Lena, testified tearfully, recounting Isabelle's fears and her desire to leave Victor. Sarah, Victor's executive assistant, under oath, admitted to a clandestine relationship with Victor, which she had initially denied, confirming Isabelle's suspicions and providing a powerful motive of jealousy and betrayal. The details of Victor's possessive behavior and his psychological manipulation emerged, creating a portrait of a man who demanded absolute control. The defense, in turn, tried to discredit the witnesses, suggesting that Isabelle's friends were biased, that Sarah was a scorned lover seeking revenge, and that the financial transactions were routine business dealings. They brought in expert witnesses who argued for the plausibility of an accidental fall during a heated, physical argument, emphasizing the dynamic nature of their relationship and Isabelle's own fiery personality. They painted Isabelle as unstable, prone to dramatic gestures, implying she might have even intentionally created the dangerous situation. Victor Moreau himself took the stand, a risky move. He maintained his partial confession, admitting to pushing Isabelle in a moment of panic and rage, but insisting it was not an intentional act of murder. He expressed remorse, claiming he loved Isabelle despite their difficulties, and that her death was a tragic consequence of their dysfunctional dynamic. His performance was carefully calibrated, designed to evoke sympathy, to portray him as a man who had made a terrible mistake in a moment of passion, rather than a cold-blooded killer. However, his underlying arrogance and a subtle lack of genuine empathy often shone through, undermining his carefully constructed narrative. The cross-examination by the district attorney was brutal, exposing the contradictions in Victor's story, highlighting his history of control and manipulation, and relentlessly questioning his claims of innocence. The DA repeatedly brought up the financial trust, the alleged affair, and the years of emotional and physical abuse, systematically dismantling Victor's defense. The image of Isabelle, beautiful and vibrant, plunging to her death from the pinnacle of their glamorous life, was a powerful and haunting presence in the courtroom. After weeks of testimony, closing arguments were delivered, both sides appealing to the jury's sense of justice and reason. The prosecution concluded by emphasizing the calculated nature of Victor's actions, driven by a desire to rid himself of a troublesome wife who threatened his image and his fortune. The defense, on the other hand, pleaded for understanding, for the jury to see it as a tragic accident, a momentary lapse of judgment in a highly charged emotional situation. The jury deliberated for 5 days. The city held its breath, awaiting the verdict. The case had sparked intense public debate, with many divided on whether it was a deliberate act of murder or a tragic accident. The nature of their relationship, the blurred lines between passionate love and abusive control, made it a complex and emotionally charged case. Finally, the jury returned. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with anticipation. The foreman stood, and the verdict was read, guilty of second-degree murder. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. It wasn't first degree, which required premeditation, but it was still a murder conviction, acknowledging Victor's malicious intent and the direct role he played in Isabel's death. It was a clear rejection of his claims of accident or self-defense. The relief was palpable for Isabel's family and friends, yet it was also tinged with a deep sadness, for no verdict could bring Isabel back. Victor Moreau's face, for the first time in the entire trial, crumpled. The carefully maintained composure shattered, replaced by a look of disbelief and despair. He knew his life, his empire, was irrevocably over. He was sentenced to a lengthy prison term, effectively ensuring he would spend the rest of his days behind bars. The man who had once commanded boardrooms and dazzled society was now reduced to a number, his freedom stripped away. The Azure Tower, once a symbol of luxury and aspiration, now carried a grim shadow, forever associated with the tragic fall from its 15th floor. The penthouse, once a stage for their glamorous lives, became a stark reminder of the deadly consequences of unchecked passion and abuse. It was eventually sold, its new owners attempting to erase the dark history, but the story of Victor and Isabel Moreau would forever be part of its narrative. The legacy of the case extended beyond the courtroom. It sparked important conversations about domestic violence, about the insidious nature of emotional and psychological abuse, and about the often invisible struggles that can exist behind closed doors, even in the most outwardly perfect relationships. Isabel's story became a tragic reminder of the dangers of such relationships and the importance of recognizing the warning signs. For Detective Reynolds and Deputy Jenkins, the case of Victor and Isabel Moreau remained a potent, haunting memory. It reinforced their commitment to their work, but also served as a stark reminder of the human cost of violence. They had witnessed the tragic end of a beautiful life, the unraveling of a once powerful man, and the profound sorrow that permeated every aspect of the investigation. The initial tears shed at the crime scene had been replaced by a quiet determination to ensure justice, but the emotional scars of the case would forever remain, a permanent echo of the fatal plunge from the penthouse. The story of the lovers' quarrel, ending in a 15-story fall and a murder charge, served as a chilling and unforgettable testament to the destructive power of a love gone terribly, fatally wrong.